Continuing with The Final Days by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Our last session, we left off in the middle of chapter 4, and if I'm following the timeline right here, I believe we're still on Friday, October 19th, 1973. When we stopped at the end of the last session, the compromise, the Stennis Compromise, where Mississippi Senator John Stennis would listen to the tapes, compare them with the transcripts typed by Rosemary Woods, and affirm the accuracy of the transcripts, or I assume suggest changes if need be. Anyway, he would give it the final stamp of approval, and then these transcripts would be accepted by Cox, special prosecutor, instead of the tapes themselves. This compromise now had been accepted by Attorney General Elliot Richardson, Senator Stennis, and Watergate Senate Committee Chair Sam Ervin and Vice Chair Howard Baker. At 7 p.m., Haig called Richardson to read him a letter from the president that he said was on its way to him. Quote, "I am instructing you to direct Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox of the Watergate Special Prosecution Force that he is to make no further attempts by judicial process to obtain tapes, notes, or memoranda of presidential conversations." End quote. Richardson was distressed that he had not been consulted, and you remember that this was added at the direction of the president to the Stennis Compromise, that no more tapes would be requested. Richardson was distressed that he had not been consulted. Haig said he had done his best. He had twice tried to make Richardson's position clear to the president. He had failed. Richardson took care to avoid saying whether or not he would issue the order. Haig figured that Richardson was balking on the order to Cox, but that he was still with them in supporting the Stennis Compromise in principle. He hung up. They had to act fast. It was decided to announce the order through a White House press release, thus eliminating Richardson as an intermediary. The order, in the president's name, was made directly to Cox, quote, as an employee of the executive branch. Haig called the senior staff to the Roosevelt Room. Bryce Harlow, a presidential counselor of the first Nixon administration, who had been recalled to White House service after the Haldeman-Ehrlichman resignations, was cranky because he hadn't been included in the negotiations. He was also due at Jean Pierre, a popular Washington restaurant, for dinner, but he drew the assignment of notifying the cabinet members of the Stennis Compromise and of the order to Cox to cease and desist. Harlow thought he had reached all of them when the White House operator called him to say that Attorney General Richardson was on the line. "Elliot," Harlow said, "I didn't mean to call you. There's no point in my talking to you about this compromise. You already knew about it. I've been calling all your damn peers around the country and telling them." "Well, Bryce," Richardson interrupted, "I'm sitting here preparing a press statement." And a footnote says, it said that the Stennis Compromise was, quote, reasonable and constructive, but took issue with the restriction on future access to the president's tapes. "I plan to seek an early opportunity to discuss this with the president," and ended lamely. Because the president never released his letter to Richardson, the Attorney General did not issue his response. So again, back to the conversation between Harlow and Richardson. "Well, Bryce," Richardson interrupted, "I'm sitting here preparing a press statement. I'm not at all sure I can do what is requested of me. I will not do what the White House asks of me." "What are you talking about, Elliot?" Harlow was amazed at the contrast between Richardson's tone and Haig's earlier enthusiastic presentation. "I've never been so shabbily treated in my life," Richardson said. "Elliot, there's no sense in your telling me. I don't know and I don't want to know. Just don't do anything irretrievable or irrevocable." Harlow hung up. Surely Haig was aware of how Richardson felt. Why hadn't Haig told him that Richardson was so out of sorts about the whole thing? He went over to the restaurant and had a good solid martini. Haig called him there, wanting to know how the cabinet members had reacted. "I didn't bother to call you," Harlow replied, "because they all liked it, except Elliot, of course." "What do you mean, except Elliot, of course?" There was a pause, and then Harlow said, "Al, don't tell me. It can't be that you don't know what Elliot is about to do." "What do you mean?" "He's drawing up a press statement. He feels put upon and shabbily treated." "That's absolutely dumbfounding," Haig said. "On what grounds does he feel put upon?" Harlow said he had no idea. Haig called Richardson and angrily led him back through the events of the week, reminding him that he had been party to each phase of the compromise. He had gone along with everything that had happened, even the restriction on future access. And on that, Haig reminded him, the president was inflexible. Haig had, after all, taken Richardson off the hook by having the order issued through the White House rather than forcing Richardson to issue it himself. So why was Richardson so upset? "You're probably right," Richardson replied. "I'm home now. I don't feel so bad about it now that I've had a drink. Things look a little better, and we'll see where we go from here." Haig began to discuss initial reactions to the compromise. Prominent members of both parties were favorably disposed toward it. Richardson let one more opportunity for confrontation pass. He did not like bloodletting. He thanked Haig for his call. Richardson had negotiated the Agnew resignation, and he felt he could once again avert a national trauma. Cox was now faced with an order from the president to abstain from seeking more tapes. In fact, Cox was getting no tapes. The Stennis compromise, no compromise in his mind, was being railroaded through. Cox reasoned that he had the court, the law, and the attorney general on his side. He announced that he would have a press conference early the next afternoon, Saturday, October 20th. When Bazard heard about Cox's conference, he thought, "Cox is going to resign. That will be tough, but the president can weather it." Richardson reached Cox just as the special prosecutor was about to appear before the television cameras. Richardson said he was sending the president a letter stating his disagreement with the restriction on future access. He made no attempt to dissuade Cox from having the press conference. Wary that Cox no longer trusted him, he did not ask the prosecutor what he was going to say. Cox stepped before the cameras. "Now, eventually, a president can always work his will," he said. "You remember when Andrew Jackson wanted to take the deposits from the Bank of the United States, and his Secretary of the Treasury wouldn't do it. He fired him, and then he appointed a new Secretary of the Treasury, and he wouldn't do it, and he fired him. And finally, he got a third who would. That's one way of proceeding." Let me go back and put the proper emphasis. "And finally, he got a third who would. That's one way of proceeding." Cox was not going to resign, he told the country. He would press in court for the tapes. He might be compelled to ask that the president be held in contempt if he refused to turn over the tapes. To Nixon, this was the ultimate defiance. He had issued a clear order to Cox, who was an employee of the executive branch. Everyone in the government was going off on his own tack. The Defense Department had refused to voluntarily provide technical advice on the tapes to the White House, and a presidential order had been necessary to get them to do so. Kissinger and the new Secretary of Defense, James R. Schlesinger, were openly fighting. Treasury Secretary George P. Shultz and Budget Director Roy L. Ashe were going at each other in public. There was no way the president could hold the government together in the face of Cox's grandstand challenge on national television. There was a war on in the Middle East. He needed to show he was in control. He told Haig to have Cox fired. Haig called Richardson and ordered him to fire Cox. He was pretty sure Richardson wouldn't do it. As expected, Richardson replied that he wanted to see the president to submit his resignation. In the mid-afternoon, Richardson went to the White House, and Haig started working him over. He must not resign now. Fire Cox, wait a week, and then resign. "What do you want me to do?" Richardson asked sarcastically. "Write a letter of resignation, get it notarized to prove I wrote it today, and let it surface in a week?" "That's not a bad idea," Haig replied matter-of-factly. "I want to see the president," Richardson said. 30 minutes earlier, speechwriter Pat Buchanan had gone into the Oval Office to talk to Nixon. Cox had to go, Buchanan told him. The presidency could not endure insubordination. The president said that the Cox situation and the Middle East were symbiotic. He had to show strength. If he was weak on Cox, he would have no credibility with the Russians or the belligerents in the Middle East. A Harvard professor must not be allowed to undermine his power. Buchanan concurred, though they both knew that firing Cox would invite a move to impeach. The president was willing to face the consequences. Buchanan admired the old man. He had guts. Richardson came in at 4:30 p.m. Elliot, the president, pleaded with him as the attorney general entered. "Brezhnev wouldn't understand if I didn't fire Cox after all of this." Nixon urged Richardson to delay. Richardson said he could not. He was thinking to himself this was the worst moment in all his years of service in government. He was standing there refusing an urgent demand of the President of the United States. Richardson, the team player. I'm sorry you feel that you have to act on your commitment to Cox and his independence, the President said, and not the larger public interest. There was a flash of anger. Maybe, Richardson replied hotly, your perception and my perception of the public interest differ. That was the end. Deputy Attorney General William D. Ruckelshaus was now the acting Attorney General. Haig phoned him, pounding away on the Middle East situation. He painted a picture of cataclysm if Ruckelshaus did not fire Cox. As you probably know, he said, Elliot Richardson feels he cannot execute the orders of the President. That is right, I know that. Are you prepared to do so? No. Well, you know what it means when an order comes down from the Commander-in-Chief and a member of his team cannot execute it. That is right. Haig thought Ruckelshaus was fired. Ruckelshaus presumed he had resigned. And I want to make a personal observation here. Haig spoke of the Commander-in-Chief here. Haig, a military man, was always thinking in military terms. But the President is not the Commander-in-Chief of the country. He's Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. So Commander-in-Chief, that term does not apply to this matter, which had nothing to do with the military, the armed forces. So keep that in mind. We frequently hear the President talked of as the Commander-in-Chief. He is Commander-in-Chief only as it applies to the military, to the armed forces. He's not Commander-in-Chief when it comes to domestic affairs, when it comes to citizens. The President is not my Commander-in-Chief because I'm not in the military. Okay? But again, Haig was always thinking in military terms. At about 6 p.m., and to him, I'm sure, he saw Nixon as his Commander-in-Chief because it was always with Haig, it was always chain of command, military thinking. Okay. At about 6 p.m., Solicitor General Robert H. Bork, the third in command at the Justice Department, accepted the order and signed the White House draft of a 2-paragraph letter firing Cox. At 8:22 p.m., Ziegler appeared in the press briefing room at the White House to announce that Cox had been discharged. Though Richardson had never delivered the order to Cox, Ziegler announced that the President took this action because of Mr. Cox's refusal to comply with the instructions given Friday night through Attorney General Richardson. Further, quote, the office of the Watergate Special Prosecution Force has been abolished as of approximately 8 p.m., end quote. Some of Ziegler's aides counted in split seconds the interval between Ziegler's return to his office and the moment when the television correspondents, having sprinted to the White House lawn, began talking, panting, live on the air. The firestorm, as Haig referred to it, had begun. After 9 p.m., Haig sent FBI officers to seal off the offices of Richardson, Ruckelshaus, and Cox to prevent any files from being removed. The television networks offered hour-long specials. The newspapers carried banner headlines. Within 2 days, 150,000 telegrams had arrived in the Capitol, the largest concentrated volume in the history of Western Union. Deans of the most prestigious law schools in the country demanded that Congress commence an impeachment inquiry. By the following Tuesday, 44 separate Watergate-related bills had been introduced in the House. 22 called for an impeachment investigation. All right, another personal observation here of my whereabouts at this time. I missed all the television specials that night, I'm pretty sure. I don't remember. Because I was a little busy. I had chosen that weekend to travel up to Kansas City from Shawnee to pick up my winter clothes. Joanna went with me, so I'm sure it was a pretty quick trip because she was still a student at the time at OBU. So I think we drove up on Saturday and came back on Sunday. So I remember that night we went to the house together. Now Mother and Daddy were in Israel at the time. This was during Daddy's 6-month sabbatical, during the Yom Kippur War and all that had started a couple of weeks before this. So they were in Israel. Joanna and I went to the house. I don't remember whether, Mother and Daddy came back around Christmas time from Israel. So I don't remember going back to the house for Christmas that year. I don't think I did. I think I stayed in Shawnee because I think Mother and Daddy were still. What we might have done is, we might have had Christmas at Patsy and Palmer's place in Virginia. That's what I figure we probably did. And then I would have gone back to Oklahoma, I assume. So that night, that October 20th, 21st there, that weekend, was probably my last time ever at the house in which I grew up, because Mother and Daddy moved to Texas the following April, I believe. I believe it was April. They came and they stopped in Shawnee and visited me on their way to Texas. So I believe that night was that weekend was probably my last time in that house. I'm not sure I knew it at the time, because I don't know when Mother and Daddy had bought the house in Marble Falls, whether they had told me all about their plans and everything. So I don't know whether I was even aware that this would be the last time I'd ever be in that house. That may have been why I went to pick up my clothes. I don't know. I'm not sure I picked up just my winter clothes or whether I picked up all my clothes. I have no idea. I don't remember. So Joanna and I went to the house that night, and then I took her to Mother's friend Stella Bunning, who had been at our church there in Bethany, at Bethany Baptist Church all those years, and been a close friend of Mother's. And Joanna stayed with Stella Bunning that night. I drove back to the house and slept there. And so the Saturday Night Massacre, as much as I followed Watergate, I don't remember. I was so busy doing all this, driving back and forth, all this kind of stuff. I don't remember following any of that on TV or in the papers the next morning. I don't know. I imagine I'm sure Daddy had the newspaper service suspended. I mean, they were gone for 6 months. So, unless I bought one at the newsstand or whatever. So, I missed out on all that in real time, unfortunately. Or fortunately, because it was a chance to be at my house and take Joanna to show her the only time that she got to see the house where I grew up in. So that was pretty neat to be able to say that, yes, she saw the house that was so special to me in my childhood, my teenage years, growing up. I say my childhood from the age of 11 on. So she got to see the house where I grew up. Years later, in 1998, Joanna and the kids and I, on our way back from seeing Joanna's family in Toronto, we came down through Kansas City and we drove by the house, and a woman was standing out in the driveway. So Joanna said, "Why don't you go and tell her, that you used to live here?" So I did, and she was very gracious and invited us in. So Joanna and the kids all got to go in my old house, so they all got to see it. But Joanna had been in it 25 years earlier for just an hour or two. But Joanna and the kids and I went through it in 98. However, in 98, it had changed a lot. The basement that was so special to me and that I'd grown up in, basically, was changed, because back when we were living there, it was all open. Somebody along the way had installed partitions to make separate rooms down there and so forth. The living room was different. Where there had been a window over at the side, there were now sliding glass doors and things like this. So it was a little different than when I lived there, but at least the kids got to see it, and Joanna got to see it again. So, all right, so we've passed the Saturday Night Massacre. We're moving on into the aftermath of that now. Still in chapter 4. A few more pages of chapter 4. We've hit the 20-minute mark, exceeded the 20-minute mark, so we'll stop here in this session and take up with the rest of chapter 4 in the next session. Thank you again for watching.